Welcome back to Raised by Giants, where we talk all things spirituality. I'm Ryder Lee. Tonight we have returning guest, Chief Science Officer of C60 Purple Power and former Mufon Consultant Ken Swartz, speaking about UFO motherships, asteroids, and spy balloons, and much more. Join us now. Ken Swartz, welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing great and glad to be on.
Yeah, I got to tell you, like I was telling you last time that you were on the show, that these C60 gummies are incredible. Whoever designed these, whoever made these and came up with them deserves some kind of prize, an award. He needs to be Employee of the Year at your guys' company. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it took quite a while. We had a confectioner kind of make them. It's a complicated, it's actually incredibly complicated process. People be surprised to put that much oil kind of in a gummy to fuse them together. It's something that's pretty difficult.
yeah, and they're just these little tiny little gummies. Yeah, they're super
Yes,
nice.
and we now also have them in sugar free. So the regular ones just had like 3 grams of sugar, about that's which is about the minimum we could put in. And then, but now we have sugar free monk fruit and allulose. So if you don't like the sugar, you can a little bit of sugar. You can always get it sugar free. So that's on. I think we have them on sale right now on the site shopc60.com.
Yeah, the sugar is a little overwhelming, but you got to have some sugar in there, at least a little bit. You know, that'd probably be the most unhealthy part of the C60. But yeah, I really like it, and it's convenient. You know, I like the oil as well. The avocado oil is phenomenal. The coconut oil is great too. But these are just perfect because all you got to do is wake up, take it out of the baggage,
Yep,
put it right in
that's
your
great.
mouth.
Yeah, the thing on the avocado and olive oil, they probably hold the most. I mean, if you want to take a whole lot for like a huge dose, because you got probably about 2/3 of a dose in a gummy, whereas with olive oil, of course, you can just or avocado oil, you can just take it up. Usually for guys like me that have a tablespoon, that have a little bit of gray hair, it's about a tablespoon a day. Younger person like you might get away with like a teaspoon and a half or something.
Yeah, I have a roommate here that's giving his dog C60, and it's really helped his dog. He said that because his dog had these tumors or cysts kind of like all over his body, and well, her body. The dogs are her, but they shrunk down. They're basically you can't even see them anymore. It's
Oh yeah, one of
incredible.
the things C60 does is it stimulates mitochondria production, which is the powerhouse of the cells. So it powers up all the cells, including your immune cells. And so if they have the ATP, because the mitochondria are little organelles inside the cell, and they make ATP, which is the energy molecule of the cell. It does like 95% of the metabolism. So if your mitochondria are doing well, then your cells are doing well, then you got good health. So because it's a C60 is an SOD mimic for that superoxide dismutase. That's like the main antioxidant mitochondria uses to get rid of it's the worst oxidative radical, which is superoxide. So and there's no way to supplement it until C60. There was nothing you could do because there's four biggies. There are four big antioxidants. Of course, one is CoQ10, and you can supplement for that. And in fact, I'm not a medical doctor, but I do it myself, so that's all I can recommend is for myself. And then there's also glutathione, which now you didn't used to be able to supplement for glutathione, but now they got some really good liposomals, which basically means they put the glutathione inside like a little bundle of fat, fat cells, oil cells, basically, or oil molecules, and then it goes through your digestive system undamaged. So that, and like Quicksilver has a good product there, and then but then the other two, which were SOD and catalase, there wasn't really any substitute for, because what SOD and catalase, they take care of superoxide, which is the most damaging oxidative radical in the body. It's like what is oxidative damage? It's like your body rusting, right? So what could rust it more than an oxygen with an extra electron? That's like the most rustiest you could be, if there could be such a word. And so what SOD would take it and turn it into hydrogen peroxide. Then catalase would take it and turn it into water and oxygen, right, through the cycle. C60 does all in one shot. It just pulls like the little molecules you can see in the back behind me. It's they're kind of unique. They put hydrogen ions on the inside of themselves to like get a positive charge, because that's what they like to be. And so they just pull the electron off the oxygen, give it to one of the hydrogen ions, turning it to hydrogen gas, and the oxygen goes away, back to be used in the Krebs cycle or wherever the cell's going to use the oxygen, and the C60 resets itself again and again and again and again, and that's why it's such an amazing antioxidant.
How often do you take it, Ken? Do you normally do the gummies now, or do you do the oil?
Well, it depends. Sometimes I do the oil, and sometimes, of course, it's kind of, it's because the gummies taste so good that the habit I switched over to having the gummies, but I still do the oil on occasion, especially if I want to take, a measured amount, a set amount, because, after 3 or 4 gummies, that would be probably passing, that's a little too much sweet there, even if it's the unsweetened one. They're really good. You can hardly tell. So yeah, it's, so you have to be careful on those gummies because they taste so good, and it's just a little too much.
Yeah, they do taste amazing. And also this C60 skin, I've been using this on my scarring on my face and some on my body, and it really makes a difference. How does the topical solution work differently than the ingestible gummies or the ingestible oil?
Well, it's pretty much one of the oil solutions that you have, and it's just that it's C60 oil isn't absorbed into your cells, and of course the C60 comes along with it and starts up your mitochondria, and it's an antioxidant. Like a lot of times, like let's say if you get a mosquito bite, you rub a little C60 oil on top of it. About 20 minutes later, it'll stop itching. Or if you get sunburn, sometimes you can, and you can put it on there, and it'll take down the swelling, the redness, and also it won't peel. It seems to. Yeah, they actually did. Actually the first study that was ever done, human study. There's lots of animal studies. I could talk about the Botry study. People have never heard about it. Basically, here's a mysterious molecule discovered in 1985, given a Nobel Prize in 1996 for chemistry, and then they didn't know what it would do, so they tested on animals, and it increased animal lifespan by 90%. But the first human test was actually for Japanese women. They put C60 in a cream, and then Japanese women put it on their face. They found that C60 reduced the lines and wrinkles in Japanese women's faces. So that was the first one. And then the next one, they rubbed it on hair, and they found that C60 increased hair growth, something like 18%. And it would bring back hair that was lost for things other than male pattern baldness. So it does slow down male pattern baldness, but it won't bring it back. But for other people who have hormone reasons, and there's a whole bunch of reasons people lose their hair, it seems to be very effective in those cases.
Would you put the C60 on your hair after you get out of the shower and leave it in, or put it on
Yeah,
before
probably
you get in the
after,
shower?
if you were going to do that. So there's actually a product called Azir, and we help make the formulation, the C60 part of their formulation. And then they have the copper peptide too. So, C60 keeps everything healthy, and the copper peptide helps do. There's a copper peptide floating around out there that you can get that seems to be pretty effective at increasing hair growth. But when you put it with C60, it's like peanut butter and chocolate. It just works so much better.
So have there been tests ran on human consumption and the rate of aging within humans, like they were doing on the mice, like life extension?
Well, it'd be kind of hard to do that. Seeing humans live so long, it would certainly take a long time. Things that we notice from our customers that long-term use of C60 actually increases average telomere length. And telomeres are little things that go on the end of chromosomes. They're like little strings, for people listening, that hold like a rope together. You have that string on the end so it doesn't fray. It's the same thing with the chromosomes, but when they get too short, then the chromosome can fray, and usually the cell has to go into apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. But then a lot of cells don't, and they become senescent or zombie cells. And so like they're pulling, when they go into fermentation, they do it by getting rid of SOD and catalase and glutathione and other things that they provide to the mitochondria to function. And they take that away. The bigger cell stops making that. And so the mitochondria have to go to fermentation mode, right? Which is burning alcohols, right? It's like 1/20th as efficient as breathing oxygen, the oxygen burning Krebs cycle. And so when you when you have that problem, basically they're producing alcohols that are poisonous to other cells, and they're just using up a whole lot of energy because it's very inefficient. And so when you take C60 goes in those senescent or zombie cells and restarts the mitochondria. And then the mitochondria will send messages to the nuclear DNA. That's the main DNA of the cell. And if they don't get the right message back, which they won't if it's a senescent cell, the mitochondria actually blow themselves up, and it's called apoptosis, programmed cell death. And they bring about the end of the cell, the zombie cell, so that healthy, and then you have a bunch of healthy cells left, but you don't have as many. And so it actually stimulates the body to make more stem cells. So that's another thing C60 does. And that's actually the reason why Japanese women's face, basically got rid of wrinkles, because C60 increases stem cell number. And as your faces age, right, the cells die away and new ones have to replace it. And that happens with stem cells. And so the stem cells, if you don't have, not having enough stem cells is why you get wrinkles in the first place. So when you get stem cell increase, then you get better hair growth, and it's probably, better skin tone and health. And they did things like you can't ethically do a lot of tests with humans. You can do a lot with animals, but you can't with humans. But they can test human skin cells or other human cells in a test tube, in vitro, as they call it. And so they did one where they actually did human skin cells, and they exposed, one got C60, the other didn't. They exposed them to like damaging level of UV radiation. And the ones that had the C60, they weren't damaged by that UV radiation. Whereas in controls that didn't, they got severely damaged. They did another one where they actually took human mast cells, and those cells release histamines. That's kind of part of allergies, why you swell up and all that. That's what histamines do. That's why you take an antihistamine, if you have an allergy thing. And so they found that C60 moderated the release of histamines in the cells, and then that took it to animals, where they found C60 prevented like the cytokine storm, because they had animals that would go into a cytokine storm if you exposed them to a toxin or an allergen, I guess in this case you'd call it. And then with the animals with C60 survive were the aphylactic animals. They went away. So that's another benefit. And they also did it with nerve cells. They gave human nerve cells. They exposed them to a toxin. Of course, the cells that had the C60 in them, they weren't damaged where the control cells were. So it protects your brain. And it's also a great hangover recovery. So if you take like a little shot before you drink and maybe a little shot after you drink, it's you don't have that hangover the next day. I guess that's a moral hazard, but some people can appreciate it.
Absolutely. So is there anything harmful in C60 at all? Any kind of additives? Because we know that other, companies put different things into their C60. So
yeah, that's the same. C60 industry is like the CBD industry, right? When it was a small, everybody at the C60, they made a quality product for their customers because they and their customers used it, right? There was family. It was small, very small business, very small. And so once it became popular, though, we have all these fly-by-nighters that they're selling products with no C60 in them, or bogus ones like Supercharged or ESS that's supposed to be a special kind of C60, but none of that's true. Any C60 molecule is just the same as any other C60 molecule. And it's one that doesn't have anything attached to it. It's like the natural molecule by itself. That's where you get the biological action. Does only dissolve C60, whether it's in oil or polyhydroxynated, which you can't really get. That's a laboratory thing. And that's the only type of C60 that works. Things like particles don't work. Particles of C60, or you'll see people C60 in charcoal, right? Yeah, and there's in the burnt wick of your candles, there's like 0.25% C60. But you'd have to take a bucket full of burnt wicks to get, a C60 you get in like one gummy. So it's probably not an efficient way of getting your C60. So it's thought maybe in the ancient times people figured out how to refine that from things, one of those alchemy secrets, but that didn't really get passed down because it was around. But there's three things you want to look for in a C60 product. First, you want sublimated, or some people call it sublimed. Sublimated is the science term, C60. And that's, I don't know if you remember, sublimation is the cousin of evaporation. If you remember from chemistry class, it's when a solid turns into a gas, then back into a solid. And so that's pretty common. And like a dry ice does that, carbon dioxide ice that you can buy. You see that just goes into a gas. And so you basically put the C60 with the production ashes in the sublimator, heats it up, and the C60 turns to a gas, goes to the other side of the sublimator where it condenses. And that's how you get 99.99% or 99.98% pure C60. It just because the way it's purified, right? Just makes a naturally pure C60. And that's the best. That's a C60 you want, because there's a lot of C60 which is refined from they use methyl benzene, a known carcinogen, which also known as toluene. So it's a very powerful solvent, and that's what they use to purify their C60. And then once they get the C60 after it's been purified, they have C60 floating in toluene or dissolved in toluene. They heat the toluene up and boil it off, basically. And then they have to repeatedly oven bake it to get the last of the toluene out of it, or the methyl benzene, but you never really get all of it, right? There's always a trace. So there's a lot of guys selling 99.99% pure C60 out there. And the only which that 0.1 is toluene, because when you get low quality C60 like that, it's naturally, or 99.5, those just naturally come from the solvent based method, because it's a less pure method. And so always sublimated C60 and 99.9% pure. And then the other thing is, you probably want get the Goldilocks of oils. We chose olive oil. Everybody knows about the Mediterranean diet, right? But I'm a little sensitive. So I'm a little sensitive. So if I drank an ounce of olive oil, I might have to go visit the bathroom, right? So what we do is I started putting in an avocado oil, which you see up there. An avocado oil has just as much C60 as olive oil, but it doesn't have the bite. A little less polyphenols, but it has really healthy oils, a nice balance of omega-3 and omega-6, just like olive oil. And then, of course, we have the coconut oil, MCT coconut oil. And for those who know about it, MCT means medium chain triglycerides, and your liver turns those into ketones, which your cells in your body can use as a flex fuel. So if you've got some glucose processing issue, or you're an athlete, you really like the MCT oil, because when you take MCT with C60, you get the energy boost from the MCTs turning into ketones, but you also get the anti-inflammatory benefits of C60. Oh, by the way, C60 is the only antioxidant that can actually increase athletic performance.
Talk to us about C60 Sexy, Ken.
Oh, yeah.
C60 Sexy.
I don't know if they can see on the video here, but yeah, we do have a C60 Sexy. This is that's our edible massage oil. And we just decided that we would provide that to our customers as I don't know, it's great for topical use in all kinds of places as well. So
relaxing massages, deeper intimacy, and lasting connection with your partner. Heck yeah, yep. Give me that C60 Sexy, Ken.
Yeah, but you can just use it regular, just for any sort of topical use. So it just doesn't have to be that. And of course, we have the roll-on, and also we're going to have a couple new products out there. Certain, I guess, cosmetic products, we'll all say, for women, and that should be coming out. And guys too. They do, some of us, looking for those wrinkles. They're coming out soon. Oh, we also have some bling down there, bottles and notebooks and cups and the standard stuff. Some hats, I think. Just the standard kind of bling that you got.
So if you were to recommend something, Ken, for someone that their first time using C60, let's say that they've never used it before, they've never ingested it before, what would you recommend them get? Would you recommend the oil or the gummies first?
I'd probably recommend the sugar-free gummies, unless because people are always excited about sugar-free. And just get the sugar-free gummies and take 2 a day to start out. We'll start with 1 maybe the first couple of days, and then start with 2. If you don't go up to, and take them in the morning, because C60 has a really energizing effect. I mean, that's why I can tell you a whole bunch of, well, I can't tell you, I actually can't say their names, but we've had athletes go from mid-pack to champions in their fields, along with some racehorses. But just letting you know, C60 is not banned by any athletic association at all. So you can it can be used for your physical enhancement. Oh, and C60 is known to also increase libido, because one of the things C60 does is make mitochondria work better. The mitochondria in your adrenal glands, that's adrenal tissue, has one of the highest levels of mitochondria, because they got to make all those hormones. So when you take C60 increases adrenal production, and that makes, like, the mineral corticoids, they regulate your blood thickness. The glucocorticoids, they regulate your sugar balance. And then there's the androgens, which turn into testosterone or estrogen or progesterone, depending on who you are, right? And it is biological, by the way, folks. It's not a choice that you make. So like we had a guy, 70-year-old guy, he goes to his doctor, he's got testosterone around 350, right? Which is, not so good. So the doctor gives him creams, he's up in the low 700s. And then he starts taking C60. A couple months later, he goes into his doctor's and he's up to 1200. So his doctor takes him off the creams. So that's the kind of things you see. And of course, if you had testosterone increases like that, well, then you would probably have an increased libido as well, and increased muscle mass. That's another good thing for athletes. They can, when you get higher testosterone, it allows you to, and it allows you to build more muscle. But this is natural testosterone because you're not making it. The mitochondria are now taking that LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol, and they're turning it into and the progesterone, or no, promegolone, and then the promegolone is turned into testosterone, estrogen, or whatever it is. It could be the pineal gland could turn it into what is there? Melatonin, and then they got the hypothalamus complex, the human growth hormone, T3 and T4 off the, there's a whole bunch. Oh, there's one thing though. If you are on blood thinners, you need to probably talk with your doctor before you start taking C60 to get more testing, because the pregnenolone produced by the mitochondria, which is then turned into, hormones. One of the hormones is the mineralocorticoids that's produced in your adrenals, and they regulate, along with several other hormones, regulate blood thickness, as you call it. And so if you take C60, the problem is the reason why your blood is thin goes away, right? So if you're taking a blood thinner and your blood isn't, quote, thick anymore, then you could have too thin a blood. So we would recommend talking to your doctor before taking, if you're on blood thinners, before taking C60.
If anyone is interested in any of Ken's products, the amazing gummies, the tart cherry gummies, get you some C60 skin, get you some C60 oil, some coconut oil, some avocado oil,
or even some C60 sexy.
C60 sexy, baby. That's what we want to hear. Yeah. And you can use promo code GIANTS10 from the link in the description, and you'll get 10% off your entire order. And I highly recommend these gummies. I haven't done the sugar-free ones yet. I'm going to try them next, but these are incredible. And I take them in the morning. I take one in the morning every day. So highly recommend it. Check the link in the description. Use promo code GIANTS10 for 10% off your entire order. So Ken, we have a lot to talk about here, not only with C60 and all that, but there's a lot going on in the world right now. We got bank foreclosures, we got China spy satellites, and we got all this talk of motherships that's going to be heading to Earth. Lester Holt, I had Wayne Steiger on my show the other day, and he said that Lester Holt said on last Thursday, that there's a mothership that's approaching Earth that'll be here within 2 months or 2 weeks. I can't remember exactly what he said, but what would be the reason for them to say mothership? Is mothership like a code word for something? Do they use mothership as a code word for like an asteroid or like a meteor or something?
Yeah, well, I used to work with Jose Escamilla. He was a filmmaker back in the day. He was a UFO filmmaker, and we used to get these videos from a guy with a 20-inch reflector telescope, and he just filmed the moon all the time. And we'd see all the time, we had like objects flying between the Earth and the moon. They were like 60 kilometers wide, 100 kilometers, across, right? And a lot of smaller ones too, right? But these were flying all the time. He had like dozens of these pictures of these things going on in space. But the thing is, they move pretty fast. They were moving so fast, they'd be out of the solar system in no time. So if there's a mothership that's going to take 2 weeks to get here, it's got to be like a junker that's running on retard check, because the ones that we've seen, like we saw one where this white postage stamp thing appeared over the moon, and you could see the shadow of it on the moon's surface. So it was maybe 100 kilometers off the moon or something, and you could see texture on it, almost like there was a city on it, something like a city on the flat postage, and it was there for like half a second, maybe half a second, and then it blinked out and disappeared, and the shadow and the thing disappeared at the same time. So it was it's hard to do, and this was back in the day when you couldn't do we didn't have the various sorts of image manipulating software that we had now. And so what was that? I mean, what was that? You know, and so yeah, so there's stuff out there, but if they ever wanted to take us over, they could have done thousands of times, right? So the fact that we're still here probably means we're in some sort of like galactic park or
Galactic playground. Yeah, makes sense. But it's just really interesting that they come out and they start talking about this mothership that's approaching Earth when just less than a month ago we had all this Chinese spy balloon stuff going on in the United States. I think there was like
yeah.
what, four of them like shot down, and then people are all theorizing that it's actual UFO shoot down, which the Pentagon, the government never said that they were UFOs. They always said that they were
Well, of course
balloons.
they were. No, they just shot down some weather balloons with a $250,000 missile. How does that work? Okay, yeah, and I mean, it's just I don't know. It's more fear porn. They always had. I think you always talk. They always talk about one of their last things they're going to pull is the UFO card. So if you remember those things, I think Werner von Braun talked about it. People would recall what he said and about what was good. First, they were going to, those commies and guerrillas, and then it was going to be terrorists. And then the final card was the UFO card, the aliens are coming. We have to take away all your rights and lock you in your houses. And take all your money away too, by the way, just because those aliens are coming, we have to protect you.
So do you think that it was actual Chinese spy balloons that we shot down, or was it something else?
No, I think it was the first one, that big white one, that was a Chinese weather satellite. The Chinese have as many or more spy satellites in orbit, that could read, the writing on my coffee mug, from miles up in space. They don't need to, they don't need to put a spy balloon in. That was just a weather satellite. Remember, it was really cold up. It was really hot. We had like a big giant temperature inversion where they had that cold air came down and it was like as cold as it's been, for a long time. Well, the weather was just messed up and the upper atmospheric airflows, because usually those things would just go around the North Pole, right? China's way up north, right? And so the weather just knocked a balloon off course and it came to the United States when it probably would have just floated over Canada or whatever. No, normally those balloons are designed to go up and they keep rising and rising and rising and rising until finally they pop and then the payload falls off to wherever it goes to. But and it got down here and then they shot it down. The other three ones, I think one was somewhere in Minnesota or Michigan. So there was a weather club and they put their own little weather balloons up, with little sensors on it. And that's what the military shot down. And maybe a university research balloon. And so, but yeah, not UFOs.
Which is really interesting because there was like four of them. There was one in Alaska, there was one on the border of Canada and the United States, there was one in Montana, and then another one I think in Pennsylvania, possibly. I'm not too sure. I'd have to look it up. Is it a possibility that these were our balloons?
Yeah, they were our balloons. They're all people are putting up balloons, weather balloons all the time. Every day in Denver, they release weather balloons, little round weather balloons. They release them with little packages, which have, telemetry so that they can tell what's going on. It happens in every city, every day in America. They're releasing little weather balloons and with telemetry on it. And, and that they can tell what's really going on up in the atmosphere. Right. So, yeah, they just, if you just fly around, you're going to find some and shoot them down. It's just ridiculous.
But it's also funny too, if it's our balloons, then why would they blame it on China and it being a Chinese spy balloon? I think that's a pretty interesting
fear porn.
Concept.
It's the fear porn. It's the latest fear porn, whether it's something, you got to do this for, or, it's the UFO alien invasion or the commies are coming or whatever it is. The Russians took down an American drone. That's the latest thing. And so it's just more fear porn. I mean, just turn on the evening news. It's pretty much fear porn, and fear porn sells though. Scary movies sells, fear porn sells, and so that's why if you turn on the evening news. But they found that if you actually turn off your television, it's the number one thing people can do to improve their mental health. The second is not going to social media sites, but
that's impossible for us to do. What are you asking us to do, Ken? We can't do that. We can't turn off the social media. That's a step too far. Turning off the news is one thing, but social media is a completely different other one. But it was interesting because there was a lot of reports, like the headlines of Russia was that Putin shot down a UFO, just like we were being told in the
Yeah.
United States that the military and we were shooting down UFOs and they weren't really balloons, which I think is another made up thing. That people just,
Well,
there's these articles that come out that say, oh, yeah, Putin shot down a UFO, and then everyone starts to believe it and gets into all this UFO mess.
well, a kid shot down a UFO, unidentified flying object, but there's those were flying over Ukraine and Russia, and you could bet there's a lot of spy material flying over different sites of a. Yeah, I mean they're doing huge amounts of it. So everybody's flying stuff over Ukraine, and if you shot something down that somebody sent up there, well, yeah, it would be a UFO, but it's probably a UFO with somebody's manufacturing mark on it.
That makes sense how they can use the word or the title UFO for anything, right? It can be whatever it is in the sky, and they can be like, yeah,
Yeah.
we don't know what it is, so therefore it's a UFO. And then people assume that it's aliens and that it's these extraterrestrials coming here and all of these advanced crafts.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's just it's and the UAP. I think that's the other one that they have now. Change the lettering, and so yeah, it's mostly it's just fear porn, and because they got to keep the people distracted, otherwise they might think or start worrying about things like banks going under. You know, it's like three banks. I don't know. You see these gray hairs here? I was around back in 2008, 2009, 2007, so I remember how this went, and it kind of started like this. We started losing banks in the spring, and then they kept losing a little bit more in the summer, and then fall came, and they lost Lehman Brothers and some other big ones, and of course, then they all consolidated and got bigger and did the same thing, and nothing had changed, and so now it's the second time around, and it's like bank blowout 2.0.
Do you
I've
think?
seen been
Do you
there, done
think?
that.
Do you think that this is going to create a snowball effect, and this is just the beginning, and it's going to continue to
Oh
get
yes.
worse because they've been talking about bailouts for all these banks that's going to basically restore them. Who knows? But I see this as if it doesn't snowball right away, then we're going to be feeling the aftershocks of this in a year or 2 years, and it's going to pick right back up again. So, do you think that we're going to see continuous failings of other banks after this?
Well, most of the banks are technically insolvent right now from their derivative exposure, and then also they have reserves. They have reserves that they usually take out in treasury bills, long-term treasury bonds. And the problem is interest rates rise, the value of a bond drops because it's not going to yield as much. So that's when you have long-term bonds. So all of these they cashed up on their reserve requirements on like bonds that are 0.5%. Now it's 5 and 7%, whatever, 5, 7%, whatever you're getting those treasury bonds at now. And so they just don't, and now the bonds are worth less. They don't have as many reserves. And so if you get a run, I mean, no bank really has enough money to cover a run because it's loaned out, right? That's the whole process of it. But basically they're just getting financially, this giant debt bubble has made them mostly financially, the value of their debts is not worth the basically the customer accounts that supposedly they had. And as long as people are just putting money in, pulling it out for everyday expenses, that works. But if there's ever a run, it's just not going to happen. So the debt bubble continues to grow because one of the problems is if you bail banks out, right, and just give everybody their cash, right, that was there, you're essentially creating more money out of thin air, and you're pumping it in the economy. And it's just like, it's very simple, folks. Inflation is not caused by higher wages or people demanding more money. What it's caused by is you have a money supply and you have a set of goods. So if you increase the money supply and the set of goods remains the same, then the price per good will go up. It's like an economic law of nature. And so because as they start bailing out, if they have to bail out the whole banking system, all these crashes, they're going to flood a whole bunch of money in, which is going to cause huge rising inflation. But then the problem is if you have more inflation, then you have to have higher interest rates on your bonds, which means the bonds that everything's based on become even less. And so the whole system goes even in for more of a red condition. So they're in a catch-22 situation. They're in like what they call the death spiral, and there's really no way out of it.
Which makes a whole lot of sense, and it seems like it's according to the plan because listening to David Dubian talk about all this for many years and doing my own research as well, it seems like they just want to price everybody out. They want to rise inflation to such a high amount that it's, $20 for a loaf of bread. It's $25 for a gallon of milk, and it's going to be so ridiculously expensive that it's going to be hard for people to pay for groceries. And I think that that's going to be the start of this huge downfall. And based off of what you're saying, is that's exactly what they're doing. By bailing out these banks, they're going to increase inflation to make it very difficult for people to go and purchase things. I mean, inflation has almost doubled in food prices. It's almost the highest that it's ever been in American
Yeah.
history right now.
Yeah. Don't believe the lies. There's a John Williams Shadow Stats. You can go there, it's online, and they actually do inflation the way they did it in the 60s, right? Once Reagan came along, they had a thing called Reagan-esque. Whenever an economic condition came out that they didn't like, they would just change the parameters. Sorry about that. Change the parameters of what it was, and so it would look to whatever it is. So you can't trust any economic data today that they tell you. The unemployment rate, the inflation rate, it's all lies, right? But John Williams Shadow Stats, just go there and you'll get it. And so inflation is running 17%, right? That's what it is. And then the other problem, they knew that this day would come because their system has to crash. Because, when they create all that money out of thin air that you have to pay back, through the debt-based money system, they don't create the interest you have to pay back, right? So yeah, they created a $100,000 loan, but they don't have the interest that you got to pay that loan with. So that means more money must be being created out of thin air all the time through new loans, right? And that process increases exponential, that wonderful thing. So at some day, that very type of system must crash. It's inevitable that will happen. That is the very nature of the system, that it just grows exponentially because you don't pay the interest. You got to keep adding on until finally the debt grows or financial, aggregates grow at such a rate that, it blows out, and then they start up. Then they start the scam over again. So that's kind of how it works.
Which is really interesting too, Ken, is that it seems like everything that we have in our reality, like the things that we use on a daily basis, isn't meant to last long, right? It's just meant to be used for a short period of time. Then it breaks, it stops working, and then you have to go buy a new one. So it's a double double. They're hitting you with a double double. They're making products that are garbage, and then they're increasing the inflation rate on those products. So they're making double the amount of money. If we just had things that would last in our world, I mean, look at vacuum cleaners, look at cars, look at everything that goes wrong with them in a very short amount of time. It's you can't help but look at everything like a scam. Like, you get a new phone, the next year there's a brand new phone that comes out, and then they slow the speed down of that old previous phone, and then it makes you go buy a new phone.
Oh yeah, it's like the great light bulb conspiracy. People can look this up, and this is when they first they have a light bulb in a fire station in Boston that's been continuous electric light bulb for since 1906. It's been on continuously, right? So, and that's what happened when they first started making light bulbs. They found that these light bulbs would last 10 years, 15 years, maybe longer. But the problem is, you sell somebody a light bulb that lasts 15 years, are you ever going to be able to sell them another light bulb? No. So all the light bulb manufacturers got together and they created new standards. And the standards are that the light bulb will go off after a couple of years, right? And then you have to go out and buy a new one. Otherwise, they'd all be out of business, because they could have made light bulbs that, it cost a little bit more, and you could make them cheaper too if they don't make them short, so that last for 15 years, but they wouldn't have a business model. So I mean, it's like some of the hedge funds that were running hospital chains. They say, is healing people really a good business model? Right? You have those people run your hospitals, dude, you're in trouble.
Which then also gets into the theory about why are we still using the same stuff that we've been using for decades now? Really the only things that has really changed in our reality has been our technology. Our way of life hasn't really changed, right? We're still using the same kind of microwaves, the same refrigerators, the same planes, the same trains, the same kind of cars. There's just been little subtle differences in order for them to manufacture a new product and then push that product out to you. And we're still building houses in the exact same way. Is there not a better way to do this? Is there not a better feasible way that is better for everybody to be? We're still using the same pipes in our house. We're still
Well,
using
yeah.
copper piping. Like, why are we still using the same shit that we've been using for decades and none of it's changed?
Well, it's probably one of its social inertia. It's also the other fact that the wealthy elites who own the infrastructure, they don't want change. Because let's say if a new energy source came out or something else radical came out, that means the value of their existing investments would fall, and they would lose money. And since they're the ones that run society and pay for the politicians, because look, an average Senate race costs what, $8 million now, right? Where does the senator get $8 million on his salary? He doesn't. Where does that money come from? It comes from rich donors, and the same rich donors that have been giving to all the other people, because there's just a handful of super wealthy in this country. The people actually looked at the real concentration of wealth, and so they own the politicians, and they're the ones that have the money. And they've been, it doesn't matter what Democrat or retardocrat gets in. When it goes right down to it, the same corporations, the same wealthy individuals are paying both sides of the aisles, right? So they control it. That's how they control it. And they may fight over things like abortions or gun rights, but when it comes down to, like, let's say bailing out banks, well, they all step up and say yes. So
Unanimous decision.
yes, exactly. And so that's when you see, or like the thing, oh, shall we keep troops in Syria? I think, or whatever that was, whether only 2 people voted for it or whatever, some ridiculous thing, or should stop bombing Syria or something. Oh well, because it's like that's who, whoever pays the piper sets the tune.
And it's so unfortunate. I mean, when you sit down and think about it, like, really nothing has changed. We're still using the exact same kinds of products. Like, yeah, there's been new developments and changes of certain kinds of products, but they're essentially the same thing. We're still using the same toilets, we're using the same sinks, and it's like there's zero, like, the innovation of our way of life and the things that we use on a daily basis has not changed at all. But there's been this huge emphasis on technology and the advancement of technology. But if our way of life would have evolved and changed the way that our technology has evolved and changed, I feel like we would be living in almost like a golden age of reality,
Oh
golden
yeah,
age
but
of humanity.
what that technology is being used for. It's very narrow technology, basically the ability to control and transmit and control information. And because you're still that, yeah, you may have that new computer, but it's still running off a coal power plant. you know and that computer maybe came in on freight on some rickety old railroad line. I mean, things are getting so bad here because they let all these corrupt oligarchic structures. We have oligarchs just like in Russia or Ukraine, right? We're no different. And they let them take over the railroads, and that's like what happened in Ohio. It was like a 2 mile long train, and there was like 2 people on it or something that were managing it, which is totally unsafe and dangerous. And the trail tracks, the money has not been reinvested in new rails. Look, China has 30,000 miles of high-speed rail, okay? The United States has zero. Japan's probably got 20, 30,000 miles of high-speed rail, or kilometers, I should say, I guess, since it's in Japan. And the same, you can find the high-speed rail in France and Germany and Belgium and even a little bit in England. But United States, zero high speed. The United States is really a second world country when it really comes down to technology. I mean, the last time I checked was years ago, but our internet speeds were somewhere between Bulgaria and Turkey. And I'm sure we've fallen behind Turkey by now. So it's pretty sad.
And I think that our technology and our development has been our way of life and the things that we use on a daily basis. It's been covered up by the fact of our technology. Right now, it's like this. You can get Starbucks delivered to your house, right? You can watch brand new movies directly on your streaming service on your TV. You have all the information at your fingertips, while we're really missing the important aspects of life. And that has overshadowed the community aspect of our reality and society, right? They think that, oh, well, I can get Uber Eats now. I can get food directly delivered to my house now, so I'm not going to, worry about any of that other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's gotten to a point. Yeah, well, and we haven't. The technological development really hasn't happened. We may have the computers. It's like entertainment tech, but that's about it. It's like, for instance, that's like they had these very, like, we get, instead of getting like a real space program, we have we have movies for it. You know, so I think there was one. India built a rocket, built a satellite, fired it up, put it in an orbit around Mars, uh, and for less money than it cost one of those recent extraterrestrial movies that they had. I can't remember what was the last one it was, but it was for less money than that, right? They actually put a satellite in orbit around Mars, collecting real data, right? Real data about Mars, pictures and weather data and all that on Mars. So, it's where you want to put your resources. There's no reason why we wouldn't have, all this there's no reason we couldn't have giant telescopes in space and really see planets around other stars, but it's not what they want us to do. They control society, and it's like the Rockefellers when they took over education and medicine in the early last century. They basically said, we want people smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork, but we don't want thinkers, right? We don't want, philosophers. We don't want that we provide that comes from our class. For the peasant worker scum, that's their box that they're going to stay in. And so that's kind of, we have a very caste society. We have people talk about race and all that. No, that's not Orange society. It's like social class, that really super top social class that really does exist, but you'll never hear about it. Not in the books, not in the movies. You don't even know that there's actually the super wealthy social class which runs your society, because they own the movies, they own the books, the publishing houses, and they don't let their portrayals of their existence even be seen by the people.
So speaking of technology, Ken, where do you think this is ultimately headed? I mean, there's a lot of theories and speculations of cyborgs and integrating with technology and like an AI takeover. I mean, AI takeover is like a staple in this community, right? And it's just been compounded upon and compounded upon. So where is this really heading with us and technology? Like, what's the next step?
Oh, well, they're going to push, the AI thing and all that, because they want to make a technocratic state. There's been those technocrats that want to have, like a total control state. I mean, look at China and how they have, they have that all their camera systems are all hooked together in one computer, which was actually, by the way, built by, US Israeli firms, right? They actually built the grid in China, which keeps the Chinese people totally surveilled. And so, I mean, they had that thing where that newscaster went someplace, anywhere, and he just started walking around, and they found him within, I think, 10 minutes, just by their facial recognition. This was years ago. It was like a thing, and they were talking about it. And so, yeah, they have like that total control over populations if you're a tyrannical group. But the only problem is when you do that tyrannical control of populations, they're also not productive populations. And so eventually those sorts of, just like the Soviet Union collapsed, the same way the Zionist Anglo-American empire that we're living under now will collapse. It's inevitable. And probably in very much the same way. In fact, I think we're starting to see like little glimmers of that on the horizon. When the US dollar goes away as the world trading currency, and it will, and we can see that progress, that's pretty much it for that whole empire.
When, in your opinion and speculation, do you think that would happen by? Like, if you could, I know it's impossible to put a solid date on it, but within a range of years, when do you think that the dollar will completely collapse as the Federal Reserve, the global reserve currency?
Well, it could be, I would say, within 4 or 5 years at the maximum, but it could go a lot faster, because one of the things, they started that war in Ukraine to see if they destabilize and damage Russia, right? It hasn't damaged Russia at all. Russia's making more money now than ever, and its economy is completely undamaged. And so that Ukraine war, and then the Russians are going to win the Ukraine war. So what is it? So that they've gone away from that. Now Plan B is war in the Middle East. Remember what happened to that guy named Saddam Hussein who started trading oil in euros rather than dollars? 6 months he was on the end of a rope. Then there was Colonel Gaddafi. He was going to make a gold dinar so the African countries could trade, with gold dinar and not need the US dollar or European banks. And well, it wasn't too long, he was gone too. And just recently, I think at one of those economic forums, the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia announced that they were going to be trading oil in yuan, the Japanese currency, or renminbi, I guess, the international currency, gold, and a variety of other currencies. that was the whole basis of the petrodollar, which held up the American stability, is that the Saudis and therefore the other Gulf states would only sell oil in dollars. And that's what kept the petrodollar. Well, now they just announced. So, you know what just happened a month ago? They're a big U.S. Israeli exercise out on the Mediterranean there, and so you know, then Saudi Arabia and Iran got together, and the China arranged it because China's their biggest customer. And so if you think about, you know, what happened to Saddam Hussein and Colonel Gaddafi, well, if the Israelis launch an attack on Iran, wouldn't that pretty much shut down all the oil flowing out of the Middle East? And what's the number? And so first off, that'll destroy the Saudi economy, right? Because they have to have that oil to keep their people happy. The Saudis don't have oil money coming in, their whole society could collapse. And of course, you know, what happened to Saddam Hussein? Colonel Gaddafi, MBS, maybe will be the next guy in that book. And then also that oil goes to China, right? And India, that are part of the BRICS. They've been causing problems, you know. And so if you cut so that's like killing two birds in one stone. So they can't attack China over Taiwan or weaken their economy, but if they cut off their oil supply, a big hunk of it, that has severely damaged the Chinese economy. So, and then they get that whole thing with Iran, Saudi Arabia going, and, you know, or the whole Gulf War. So that looks like plan B, is war in the Persian Gulf, or Israeli-Iranian war. So we'll see how that goes. But
so the big question that I think everyone would have, and there's been a lot of speculation on as well, is what replaces the dollar, the petrodollar that we've been using for a really long time. There's been theories and speculation that cryptocurrency is going to replace it, this blockchain-backed digital currency. So in your opinion and your thoughts and your ideas, what do they replace the dollar with when the inevitable collapse comes of the dollar? Are they going to replace that with a gold-backed currency? Is it going to be a digital currency, a blockchain currency? What's going on there?
well, I think what it'll be a BRICS-based currency that'll be weighted like a little bit of yuan, a little bit of rubles, a little bit of rupee, you know, the things. And so basically the yuan will become the renminbi, which is the name for the Chinese international currency, will become the world trading currency. But it'll probably come as a clump block because, you know, that allows you to, because if you have that clump, then you can trade with China, Russia, or India, right? And that's most of the world, right? Where does most of the world get its stuff, right? Those countries. Asia is the main industrial production. So that's probably what it'll be. It'll be just basically the renminbi with a couple of hangers on will become the new world trading currency. And then the US will be, you know, just another national currency. And well, we don't actually have a US dollar. We have a Federal Reserve note, which is the Federal Reserve is a private bank and it creates private currency. So that currency technically in your pocket, even though it's printed by the Treasury, is not a US Treasury note. It's a private currency that the Treasury is forced to print. Not that, so the government is subservient to the Federal Reserve Board. And so that's why, you know, why does Congress do what's told? Because the Federal Reserve runs, you know, the people that own the Federal Reserve run our government. Our elections are a farce. And as we found out in the last election, you know, but so that's basically, so what they're going to do here, I don't know. Because you see, the thing is, they print money out of thin air, and when you have the world trading currency, right? Other people have to use your dollar. You know, if Brazil wants to trade with China or Japan, right? It has to use U.S. dollars to do that, or that's the way it used to be, right? So they have to give us stuff for those U.S. dollars for the privilege of trading with each other, right? So that's kind of a raw deal for them. But we're basically getting stuff for free by being the world trading currency, right? And so when that privilege goes away, because the various neocons have been using the dollar as a club on every country they could, you know, they got China under some sanctions, they got Russia, they got Iran, they got Cuba, they got Nicaragua. I mean, you know, they got like half the world under some sort of sanctions or other. And well, people don't want to use that currency anymore. They want something that doesn't get sanctioned, that they know that they're going to be trading with them. So when that goes away, all that inflation that they've been basically paying for the U.S. military with all this printed money that other countries have to do, it's like when the Soviet Union fell, right? They had all these giant armies, and the boats just rusted in the harbor till they sank, right? There are vast armies of tanks just rusted in the field, right? The planes just fell apart. because there was no money to do it, because all that money, that they used to have with their empire went away. And the same thing's going to happen with America. Basically, the US dollar will drop to, or the US Federal Reserve note will drop to a fraction of its cost. And I mean, and basically the best choice for humanity, for Americans, is basically to replace their government. I think there's something like that in the Declaration of Independence that you could read. And it's really gotten to that point. I mean, if you right now it's kind of bad, but when it gets really, 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 really bad, I mean, is that when people are going to rise up and say, no, we need a new government? And exchanging one Democrat for a retardocrat is not going to get it, because they're both on the take. So you need a whole new system, or you need to clean the system basically, and set in a whole other set of representatives that isn't just paid for by the super wealthy elites. But but basically you have to pry the levers of power out of their cold dead hands. Sorry, that's what it's going to take.
Which makes me think like that this whole system is just a part of the plan, right? That the collapsing of all of it is because they're lazy. They've been lazy for the past, really 10 years. They've been lazy with everything that they're doing, and people can see directly through it. So what's the angle here for being so lazy with their propaganda? The only thing that I can think of is that they're purposefully manufacturing a collapse.
Well, I would say it's an inevitable part of a historical process. I mean, just look at George Bush versus W. It's like a degeneration of the generations. And so, George Bush, the senior or whatever, H.W. Bush, he was an evil guy, but, he was a competent evil guy. Then we got W, and which is just, was kind of a joke. And he had Rummy and Rummy and Cheney running him, right? Dickie from Rummy and Dickie running him from behind the scenes, daddy's boys, right? Who are still in that competency, but that level of competence is gone. They just it's like the Communist Party in China. Is their grandkids of those top leaders? They all moved to the United States and drive fancy cars around from all the money they skimmed off the top of the system. So and that's it's sort of like decadence, and they just don't have a replacement class that has the competency that they had before. So basically, through social processes, they're just falling apart. Because look at all these guys, the current administrations, Blinken, Sullivan, Newland. I mean, these people are so narrowed. They have no. A lot of the servant classes. There's one thing, the super wealthy, but they're a tiny elite and they don't do the work. The servant classes, they have this whole structure. You have to jump through all these hoops on their way up. You have to never get the bad score, never do anything wrong, never do that. And then these type of people that are going in that thing, they'll take, if they go to college, they'll take like 101 history and 101 science and 101 and everything else on whatever that selective major is. So they get the highest level scores, and then when they get out, they go to the right, I don't know, apprenticeships or whatever you would call that, that they have, and then on and on. And so when you get that type of people get to the top, they have a very narrow understanding, not like before, right? We had different type of education system, different kind of social system. So these people, they know whatever that one thing is very good, but they have no personal life experience. They have no historical experience because they don't hear it from their grandparents ever. They have no educational experience because they took all those 101, 201 classes, the simplest things. So they basically have no clue what the hell's going on. And then you put them in charge, and of course they run the ship on the reef. It's just like, you can take over some big old boat, right? You could be a pirates and take over a boat, but if you don't know how to use that boat or run it, you just run it up onto the rocks and destroy it. And that's basically what happened in the United States. A bunch of criminal cartels came in, and cabals came in and took over the United States. And then they were running it, and then they just ran it right into the rocks and sank it. That's really probably the closest analogy. And they're just stupid. Right now, they're just degenerate and stupid, and they're just doing stupid things. All they know is how to do one thing. It's like hit countries over the head with a dollar. Well, then the dollar goes away as a world trading currency. And then what do they have? They have nothing, and we have hyperinflation. And that pretty much that takes out any government.
So what can we expect for the rest of 2023? Can we expect more of this UFO threat narrative stuff? Can we expect more mothership talk and more rumors of wars happening? What's your expectations for the rest of this year?
I would say yes. More of the same and more of the more, right? more outrageous, more whatever. I mean, they got to come up with distractions and fears, to keep the population. If people are in fear, they can't think. So, and they're distracted, right? Their focus is gone, and they're not in the frontal lobes anymore. So yeah, they have to do that to keep people's eyes off what's really happening. I mean, if you're a smart person, or you want to be prepared, having a good supply of food on hand, a source of where you can get some purified water, maybe cash on hand. I mean, just in case, because what happens if the plastic stops working, right? How are you going to feed yourself, your family? You need to be prepared. And David Dubai talks about all this all the time. It's nothing your listeners haven't heard before, and it's just really important. And the world, that sun will shine the next day. They'll blow this system up, and then a new one will come, which will be better than the one that we had before, because those crooks will be out, and we had an honest system in which people rewarded for their work and their productivity, then people could have really good lives. Because back in the 70s, you don't remember it, but I do, because I'm up that age. The average American made 4 times what they made today. So take what you're making right now and times it by 4. That's how, one guy could go to work, and the wife could stay home and take care of the kids and do all that stuff, because that's the way society was set up. But today, all that money goes, I mean, we're almost already to the World Economic Forum world where you own nothing and be happy. Well, we almost own nothing and we're not very happy. And, your money goes up to the government through all those taxes. You just see your little IRS taxes coming up here pretty quick. But there's a tax on everything in the step. So if you add it up, and then the interest payments, which is a tax by the banksters on you, then 70, 80, maybe more percent of what you make is going into somebody else's pocket. So if you were able to keep 90% of what you made, like in the old days, then yeah, you could have a prosperous life too.
I agree so much. Thanks so much for coming on back on my show, Ken. I appreciate you a lot. Where can people get, or if they would like to purchase your products and get C60?
Well, they could go to shopc60.com, and that's shopc60.com. But there's also another place you might want to go to, and that is whatisc60.org. And that's because we've posted all the human studies, right, or human cell line studies, because that's something we can post. But 3 other agencies say we can't. So all the animal studies and the human studies, and like a bunch of C60s companies got together and kind of made an industry site, like a nonprofit, where all the information about C60 can be. So you can go to whatisc60.org and you can learn about the good C60, the stuff that isn't effective, and industry hit pieces, and it sort of lets have all the human and animal studies, and learn the real benefits of C60.
Awesome. Thanks so much. The link to Shop C60 will be in the description of this video. And if you use promo code Giants10 from the link in the description, you'll get 10% off your entire order. For everyone else, thanks for watching and listening. Much love to everyone in the chat. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button to help the channel and the YouTube algorithm. Share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon as well for notifications. The links to all of my other platforms are in the description as well. Please be sure to subscribe on all of the different podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Rumble, Odysee, and Rokfin. Thanks so much, Ken. Appreciate your time here this evening. Love to have you back on sometime here in the future. We can get into all kinds of different things. And
looking forward to it, and I'm sure there'll be plenty more to talk about.
Absolutely. And remember, we're not only in a spiritual war, but a war on humanity. Stay aware, stay alert, keep loving your heart for everyone. Stay safe out there. And if you can see through the illusion, you are the solution. See you guys next time.